Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robin Hebert, and I'm a senior fellow at CPE in the Student Success and Access Unit, and I want to welcome you today to our breakout session, and I'm beyond excited to welcome Aurely Garcia Tulloch from the Community College Research Center at the Teachers College at Columbia University today to be our special guest. I have been a big fan of the DEEP framework for a number of years and the subsequent work that has come from that as we've been focused on the needs of students and enrolling more of our underrepresented groups in dual credit classes in Kentucky. And so I'm just excited to be able to introduce her and have her be here with us today to share a little bit about that work and also some work that she's been doing more recently on student perceptions of dual credit, what they care about, what they need, what they're interested in. So she's going to share some of that in today's presentation as well. Aurely grew up in Tampa, Florida, and she now lives in Rockland County, New York, which is closer to her work. She is a first-generation dual credit student herself. She completed an associate's degree while she was still in high school, and she credits a lot of her current success to that experience. So she's going to talk a little bit about her own story today, which is a very compelling one. So as I said before, she's now on the research team at the Community College Research Center. And so without further ado, I want to introduce Aurely Garcia Tulloch.
Sorry, give me 1 second to set everything up. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you all. I like a little wave. This will be, I will say, a slightly engaging presentation. I have some moments, but I do like audience engagement as much as we can. But thank you all for allowing me to be here today. Thank you, Robin, for inviting me, and Heather, if she's out here. My name's Aurely. I am working at the Community College Research Center as a senior research assistant, working on our dual enrollment, dual credit research. And today I'll be talking about dual credit as a college success strategy and rooting it a lot, like Robin said, in my experience, the data, going into Kentucky a little bit, and then about what our research is saying. But before we get into that, I think, if you go to the next slide. Okay, we're gonna play a little game. I think most people are familiar with Kahoot. But if not, you could use your laptop or a mobile device to navigate to kahoot.it. We're going to do a little bit of testing your knowledge on dual credit. Oh, thank you for doing all the tech in the back. Sorry, give us 1 second. While you're here, thank you all for just allowing me to be here today. Is anyone native Kentucky, or are we more like came here? I see a lot of native folks here. Pretty much the whole room is native, okay. Anywhere outside of Kentucky? Anyone from Florida? Like one Floridian? If you're from outside of Kentucky, where are you from? I saw a couple hands in the back. Illinois? Awesome. Cleveland, Ohio? You say over here? Yeah. Charlotte, North Carolina. Okay, so a lot of different areas, and I bet dual credit sounds and looks a lot different in every one of those states. I don't know how familiar the audience is with dual credit, but we'll go into it more now. Seems like everyone's in the room, and we can start the game. Thank you so much. It will pop up really quickly on the top again. Okay. Our first question is approximately how many high school students are taking dual enrollment nationwide? The game pin, in case you need it, is 966969. If you need me to read that again, just raise your hand. I can read that one more time. It's 966969. Oh, oh no. Okay, if you don't mind pairing with a partner, then at the end of the day, we need at least some winners. Okay, so the answer to this one is 2.5 million high school students nationwide. That is recent iPads data that we were able to do an analysis on. But it's pretty incredible to think that that is just that many students who are in high school taking college courses. Ooh. We got Eric on the top right now. Awesome. True or false? Nationally, 65% of public high schools offer dual enrollment. Got 7 seconds. Awesome. Yeah, so that is false. It actually is significantly more. It's around 80% of public high schools offer dual enrollment and dual credit. Next question is, how many students took dual enrollment courses in Kentucky during the 2022-2023 school year? Oop, I can try to move down here if you can't see. Does that work? Great, so that is 54,818. Does that surprise anyone? Is anyone surprised? I don't see much surprise, but this number will be likely growing. This is based on recent iPads data that was also part of that 2.5 million students that we mentioned earlier. And now we got Brian at the top. Dual enrollment accounts for, this is 1 out of what community college students nationwide? Sorry. I can also read the answers. The triangle is 1 out of 5, the circle is 1 out of 7, the prism is 1 out of 6, and the square is 1 out of 8. Great, so most folks got this correct. 1 out of 5 community college students nationwide is actually a high school student, which is pretty incredible. Awesome, Ashley D. Great, and this is our last question. In 2022-2023, dual enrollment accounted for this in Kentucky. This is specifically the Kentucky Community College and Technical System. Great, so mixed responses, but very close. 1 out of 3. So that is 1 out of 3 students was a dual credit student. Awesome, so we'll just do the podium super quick and then I'll get into the presentation. So number 3, we got Erica. Number 2, Rara. And number 1 is Dan. Can I get a quick round of applause for our colleagues and friends? Great job. Okay, so we got a lot of folks in the room who know a lot about dual credit. So what I'm saying shouldn't be very surprising. But I'd like to start out with my story. That will be slide number 3. Great. So this is me. That is a photo of me in 2019 when I graduated with my associate's degree in high school. And that's a photo a few years later in 2023 when I got my graduate degree in higher and post-secondary education. So dual credit really means a lot to me. I mean, it means a lot to my colleagues, but it is very close to home. Growing up, I grew up in Tampa, Florida, like Robin mentioned, And I did not know what college was. I knew it existed. I knew it was a place I had to go. But I didn't really know like what that path looked like for me. My dad grew up in Jamaica. He came to the US in the military. My mom, she got her degree, but she was in a bad car accident when I was a kid. So didn't really get much information from her on what college went with and how it was like. And so dual credit not only was my only way out of the situation I was as a low income student, but it was my only introduction to college. And so all of this work, as much as it means a lot for me, I think of the 2.5 million students who it also means a lot to, which makes me go into, sorry, into this slide. So my story is that of a low-income student who discovered dual enrollment and dual credit in Florida, but nowadays that accounts for 2.5 million students nationwide. And my story isn't the only story out there, and on top of that, the majority of that is in the community college sector. Also, if I am blocking the slides, can you guys see okay? Okay. Which is 21% of community colleges. That is 8 million students, which is pretty incredible to think about nationwide. But on top of that, we know that this number will continue to grow because this is just recent IPEDS data. Oop. Oh no, I think we're playing around with the slides, sorry. So what does this look like in the US and what does this look like in Kentucky? So when we look at the first part of these graphs, we see that the under 18 age, which we assume accounts for dual enrollment students, dual credit students in the United States, that number is steadily increasing. And to the point where when we look at the US, it's at a curve that goes up like this, but when we look at Kentucky, there is an even more drastic curve upwards. When we compare this to students who are age 25 and older, we can see that that steadily declines. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be thinking about our older students who are going back to college, but it does mean that the students who are under 18 and enrolled in college right now could be a huge way to both on-ramp students onto a great way to learn about college, but also just know about the opportunity of college existing. If we think about this right now, this just shows up to 2021. If we continue looking further, we're estimating this to continue going steadily upwards. And so what does that look like broken down state by state? So specifically Kentucky, it looks like 32%. 32% is 11% above the national average of dual enrollment students being enrolled. And again, this number will continue to increase. And what does that look like again, specifically for community colleges? So we mentioned around that 50,000 number that represents both community colleges, 4 years, privates, et cetera. This is from an analysis that we did on IPEDS data, which is a blog on our website. That is 32,000 of those students being in community colleges. That is huge. That is a significant number of students that we have to make sure we're serving, because they're more likely to want to go on to college, continue, help our enrollment, and we'll get a huge diversity of students who are interested in college. But one thing that is interesting about this graph, which may not be interesting to everyone, is it's predominantly serving white students. That is what it looks like in most of the US right now, is that white students are overrepresented in dual enrollment. But that doesn't mean that within that, it couldn't also include low-income students. So as much as we want to make sure these programs are both serving more students equitably and increasing the amount of diversity in dual enrollment, we also have to think about what are our low-income students thinking and doing, and are they included in this demographic that we're serving? And so again, what does this look like nationally? So we do see that white students are overrepresented in comparison to pretty much every other student demographic. In the field, we've heard the phrase programs of privilege being used very often because dual enrollment programs have historically been more accessible to white, higher income students. A lot of it comes from knowledge. Like, I didn't know that college existed. How would I know that dual enrollment existed? And so a huge part of that is really rethinking how are we going to redesign this program to make it not programs of privilege, but a program that's accessible to everyone. And so this is really when we get into the research studies that not only CCRC has been doing for, I think, the past 15 years or more, but what we're seeing nationally of how dual enrollment, and I say dual enrollment and dual credit pretty interchangeably, but how it's helping students of color and students who may need this opportunity most. And what we're seeing is that dual credit, dual enrollment can help students that are falling behind. It can increase college applications and acceptances among Black students, and it can help boost Black and Hispanic student entrance and persistence in STEM courses. That is huge. And this isn't even accounting for what are these students learning day to day when they're in these courses. I know one of the things that I learned was just how to email a professor and just the basics of college etiquette. And so this is just some of the data that we've seen. But what does this look like in Kentucky? Specifically for low-income students, it really does look like students are continuing to persist. They're interested in college, they're persisting to the second year, and on top of that, they're getting higher GPAs than their other peers. This is especially important for a student who, again, may not have known that college was an option for them. So what are the major barriers that we're seeing in the field? All of our research is pretty much out there, but we do partner with a lot of organizations that are also doing incredible research. And this research priorities report came out in July 2022. I was obsessed with it in graduate school, definitely recommend reading it. But it does outline some of these major barriers that are impacting students, both getting into dual enrollment, their persistence, and their matriculation. And that starts with policies. So policies vary, just like the phrase dual enrollment varies, state by state, county by county, etc., including instructor qualifications, student eligibility, and then practices such as lack of outreach. So maybe I know about dual enrollment because my mom found out about it in the newspaper, which was kind of crazy. But if she didn't read the newspaper that day, and if my friend next to me didn't happen to know about it, then how would we know this was even an option for us? That includes also advising and supports. A lot of the time we hear staff of 1, maybe staff of 3. If it's really crazy, we'll hear staff of 10. But a lot of the times dual enrollment programs are understaffed, and that includes a lack of support just because there aren't enough staff that can support all the students in these programs. We also have these mindsets that we do hear not as often from our super cool practitioners like you, but that dual enrollment is for advanced students. And we know that that is not truth. There are students who may, like myself, just want to persist and get an associate's degree in high school, but even 15 credit hours or less can expose a student to what college is like, can expose a student to what college could be for them. And so that brings me into, the top is a little cut off, thank you. That brings me into a couple of our reports that I'd like to highlight. So first, CCRC came out with this report with Aspen Institute in October 2020 called the Dual Enrollment Playbook, which outlined some practices that we saw across the nation of really cool things practitioners are doing to make dual enrollment more equitable. But in doing that research, we thought about guided pathways, which we've been studying a very long time, and we thought about how can we extend these guided pathways practices not just to all colleges, but specifically to dual enrollment. And so the report in the middle is thinking about how can we rethink dual enrollment to be more accessible and intentional, thinking about the guided pathways reform approach. And then our deep insights report, which is what is outlined on your tables with the strategies and practices, that outlines a framework for reform that we believe can truly redesign and help students learn about dual enrollment, get on a path, get to the degree they want to do, and make a high opportunity family sustaining wage post high school. And so this is what this looks like. This is the framework for reform. I'm gonna go through each strategy, but just to see what it looks like, I'm a very visual person. It is leading to something. We're not just thinking about dual enrollment being stagnant, being a course that they just take or an associate's degree that a student just has, but it's leading to something that a student is interested in, whether it be in the workforce, whether it be a 4-year degree, or whether it be advanced education. And so I'm gonna go through our fieldwork. I have one more slide, just to describe where all this came from. So we go through so many analysis of different data, and I'm a qualitative researcher, so it was a lot of data to go through. Um, but we went to Texas and Florida because they have a ton of dual enrollment, talking in the 100,000s in Texas, and in Florida, the same thing. And we saw that both these states had guided pathways practices that were pretty far along ahead, and they were also starting to think about how can they redesign their dual enrollment programs to be more equitable, accessible, and intentional for their students. We visited these colleges and some high school partners in rural, urban, suburban, so many different areas of Texas and Florida. And so the first thing that the deep framework for reform starts with is outreach. Again, I kind of touched on outreach and how that impacted me, but in this framework, we think about how can we scale it. And so that would start with focusing outreach at underserved high schools, at underserved students, and to communities, whether that be being in person and doing a parent night, which I know a lot of you probably already do, posting up an ad in a local business, just putting the word out there that dual enrollment exists. That also requires us to start outreach before high school. In different states, like in Florida, dual enrollment can start up to 6th grade. Not that we're recommending that, but it is an opportunity that students may be able to have, and if they know about it, they would be able to access it. So starting intentional outreach before high school is imperative. That also talks about leveraging community connections. So we're talking about our business partners, we're talking about just people at a local church I've heard a lot about. Just being able to make sure our community knows about this opportunity, because at the end of the day, a lot of students who are coming from underserved communities tend to stay within their communities. And so if they're able to get this college credit, continue to their degree, and then work in the field in their local community, they're giving back. And that's a great thing to leverage in terms of a community connection. And so that also requires us to build trust with parents and families. What in the world is dual enrollment? Why is my kid on a college campus? That requires trust building. And also rethinking how we can use high school grades as an alternative for eligibility. This is very complex because legislation gets involved, state policy gets involved, but we have seen in some of the more advanced DEEP implementers, DEEP standing for dual enrollment equity pathways, that they have been seeking alternatives to try to get students into dual enrollment. Not trying to lower the bar on what dual enrollment actually is, but seeing if there's other alternatives to help students. And so the second deep area is this thought of alignment. How can we align dual credit to interests that students have both in their college and in their career? And this starts with inventorying dual credit offerings. So sometimes we'll see high schools and dual credit partnerships that will have AP, dual credit, IB all in the same course. And some students just get overwhelmed with what the options even are. Miami-Dade specifically, their network of college systems is gigantic. It's a huge part of Florida, huge representation of students. And because of that, it had a lot of high schools that had AP, dual enrollment, IB, all being offered the same ENC course. And so alongside the college partner and the high school partner, they work together to figure out how can we reduce these duplicates and help students understand what classes they should be taking to then succeed in dual enrollment and what their interests are. This also leads to mapping and embedding these offerings. Mapping, again, it's important that students know where these classes lead to. Specifically thinking about, okay, you're interested in business. Maybe we have to reconsider what courses you need to take that aren't in ABC field and reorient them and have them on a plan in order to make sure these classes both count for what they want to do and then are applicable to a major. And then in some cases, we saw these classes being embedded, specifically in CTE schools. This was very common in Texas, where we saw PTEX or other specialized schools where they were embedding these courses within the regular curriculum. Again, it all is a case-by-case basis, but these are some strategies that we saw that were really helpful. This also talks about advising. So thinking about, we're not just trying to force students along one path, right? We know that students may change their mind. I thought I would be a pharmacist, and now I'm here. And so there's a lot of different ways to learn about dual credit, but learn about how we can get it to allow students to be able to understand what their options are. And so a lot of this is just showcasing the options that are out there. A lot of the times we know about the ENC, the English dual credits, the general education requirements, but college is so much. And students should be at least aware that there are so many options of things they could try out. Again, informing them how this applies, if it affects their transfer, excess credits, etc. But just showcasing to make sure that they know that option is out there for them. Coordinating advising roles is interesting because in some cases we saw really direct correlations. So we saw folks that were cross-hired at community colleges and at the K through 12 school. We also saw instances where folks would come from the high school to the college and vice versa. But intentional coordination for things like parent night was so impactful for students and parents to learn, hey, that's a resource that I know I can talk to for dual enrollment and dual credit. And that also talks about helping students develop this college program plan with checkpoint advising. So again, a map is great, a plan is great, but if we don't check in with you on this plan or map, how do we know you even want to still do it? And so being intentional about 0, 5, 15 credit miles, especially if they're getting an associate's degree in high school, is extremely important. I'm gonna double check my time super quick. Okay, we're doing good on time. This is the last deep area. It's talking about support. Students need a lot of support in dual enrollment, dual credit programs. That is just fact. That doesn't mean hand-holding all the time. It truly just means that this is a new thing for them. It's a new place. It could be a new school even. And so that requires us to think about what kind of courses are we offering at the beginning of their dual credit experience. I've seen in instances where counselors and advisors will recommend certain courses that other dual credit students are in to kind of form that community. That was very common with my peers. I've also seen counselors talk about, hey, these are some easier classes to maybe just test out dual credit with your peers. How can we scaffold that over time to make sure that students know that they feel well supported? But maybe there's also classes that if they're a little scared, will apply to their major and or general education requirements and also onboard them onto dual enrollment. And so that also talks about responding quickly when students are struggling. I've seen folks in the field text, do reminders of like, hey, how are you doing in dual enrollment? How's it going? We've also just seen communities, so students will create their own community of just being dual enrollment students and really just being able to be a leaning hand because it can be so demanding. And as a person who did it, it was probably one of the hardest educational experiences I've had, especially knowing that I couldn't go to my family directly to be like, is this normal? Is this what it's supposed to be like? So who am I going to lean on? Probably those advisors. And it really just, having a community is especially important, to say the least. Providing additional support for online classes is also super important, as we saw a couple college and high school partnerships where that was their only option. These students could take any class that they wanted, but because their local community college was about a 60-minute drive away, most of their options were online. And so this photo specifically is actually a lab that was set up for students on campus, so they could all take classes online together and lean in on each other when they needed help. We also have to think about our instructors. So thinking about quality of instruction. We outline this a lot more because I have a lot more to keep getting to in our Deep Insights report. But we can't forget about our instructors because they are the ones truly helping this whole thing happen. And so I have a quick think, pair, share. We have about 5 minutes until I move on to some other stuff. Thinking about the practices that I just told you, this framework for reform, what deep practices are currently working well in your dual enrollment partnerships? What challenges do you face? And what further actions and investments are needed? And you don't need to have an answer to everything. I'll give you guys about 5 minutes to talk with your table partners. no, I was.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But I was just. That works.
Okay. Okay. Will somebody help? She's going to let some people share out. All you got to do is just take the mic. Yeah, it's hot. It's hot. And so if you go, she's going to go over there. I'll go to the back, and if you kind of stay on this side.
Oh, sure.
So as they share out, we'll. Are you going to be in the back? Do you want... Okay. Oh, okay. Looking for volunteers. Anybody willing to share? Huh? I know this table will share once you. I know you'll think of something brilliant in the next minute or two. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Gotcha. I do have another table who volunteered.
She's already a great person in our institution, so
Okay.
it's up to her if she wants to or not.
Okay. Okay. Would you all like to share anything? We get started?
Well, we just talked about all the problems we got.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's okay if you want to say something about that.
Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. I'm in the back of the room now. So I got some awesome volunteers across the room. Thank you all for your help, Robin. And over here, thank you for your help. If you have any answers to these questions, so I'm going to start with this table over here really quick.
Shoot. Darn, I was going to write it down first. So one, we discussed that pretty much everything higher education comes back to advising. And for all this to really work and for all students to be successful in the dual credit world, and I'm in really the transfer world, but they interconnect a lot, advising is key. And then from a personal perspective, which is also a professional perspective, students who get associate's degrees are actually at a disadvantage in the state, and I would like to see that changed.
Thank you. Did you guys still want to volunteer? Okay. Do you
You got two.
Okay, hi. So we talked also a little bit about some advising challenges. So if a school is offering, a particular math class, what did you say? Oh, contemporary math. So if a school's offering a contemporary math, which is not required for a STEM degree, and a student's like, well, I'm going to take that contemporary math because it's dual credit. It's college credit. I'll get college credit, but really what they need to be in is college algebra. So there's some challenges with students, I guess, wasting their time or wasting their KIA dual credit scholarship, taking a course that's not going to benefit them in the long run.
Thank you. We'll take one more up here. If we...
I got one up here too. Can we do two more? Because I got one right here.
Okay.
So in talking about a deep practice that works well for our institution, especially targeting low income and underrepresented populations, you mentioned doing away with testing, looking at their high school grades. We do that for our classes. So we only have 2 classes in our whole program that require an ACT. And we have other ways for students to get around that because we know underserved and low income students are typically not doing as well on those exams, and it's not a representation of what they are capable of. So we do things like counselor and teacher recommendations for those courses. So we know that maybe those students, if they have extra support from both the high school and us, they'll be successful in those classes. Or finding another course that would serve as a prerequisite to specifically college algebra. So they would take like Math 101 in the fall and then Math 115, which is college algebra in the spring.
Awesome. I'm going to get back. I think we're good. Thank you. Well, thanks. Thank you all for the questions. I apologize. I didn't just realize the time. Just to respond back to a couple of the statements. So really awesome to hear about teacher recommendations, especially because that could be a great way to get students. I thought about myself. In Florida, we have the PERT, which is kind of like the AccuPlacer placement exam. And I took it about 3 times before I was able to even test into like basic college algebra. And it truly was because I was scared of the test. I was just afraid of test taking. And after time, when I finally practiced and I had to do it, I finally was able to do it. But it was a huge barrier and a huge scare, at least for me. So thanks for mentioning that. I also wanted to touch in the back related to getting an associate degree in high school. As someone who's done it, I don't think it is for everyone. And I think one thing I love about the DEEP framework is that we're not pushing that. We're truly just trying to think about who's not being served by dual enrollment and how can we get them exposure to it. But I think there does need to be more conversations about what a student's intentions are in dual credit. And if they want an associate's degree, this is the reality of what it's going to be. So thanks for bringing that up. And then over here, my last statement about the one class that students should be taking before the other class. I'm happy that you brought that up because there are so many courses that students are just unaware of the order of which they need to take them. And honestly, if I chose my own map, I probably would have a very weird amount of courses. But I think, again, thinking about the DEEP framework, hopefully it responds to that. How we can intentionally think about what courses students are taking at what time, how can we map them and make sure we have checkpoint advising to make sure they're even still enrolled in these courses. I'm just happy it was brought up because it is a key challenge. So thank you all for your comments. I'm gonna keep going through the rest of the presentation. And cool. So going back to DEEP, dual enrollment equity pathways, it all starts with this DEEP mindset. So we mentioned one of these barriers being this belief that dual enrollment is only for students who are advanced. And our objective is to rethink that, starting with prioritizing underserved communities and schools as an opportunity for students to have upward mobility both in life and in college. Dual enrollment can be life-changing. In most cases, it's low cost, it can be free in some states, and even taking one course can mean the difference in a student going to college or not. That also requires us to commit to what's doing best for students, even if it's not super fast. Legislation can always bog us down. And policies can also do the same. But it also can be very empowering that these are discussions that are being had. And these are discussions in the room that need to be had. And on top of that, we have to think about what do our students want? And that's just kind of alluding to something else. But that requires us to commit to what students need, how can we best serve them, and believing in the potential of all students. All students could be successful in this if this is what they want to do, and if they're aware of the opportunity cost it takes to do dual enrollment. That also requires us to recast CTE, so career technical education. It has often been seen as a way to get directly into the workforce, when it can also be seen as a way to get into the workforce, a way to get a degree, a way to take a college course that can expose you to what college is, just in a technical field. There's a lot of stigma behind it, but it requires us to recast and rethink in the same way we're thinking about dual credit for all students. We're also thinking about what does CTE mean for all students. And so we observed a lot of ways that we could see both the costs, leadership strategies, and what it takes to implement these deep practices. Specifically, we saw that folks were negotiating college and K-12 interests to see what those win-wins were. A lot of the times, the K-12 and the college, they just had competing interests, and getting on the same page was the first step. Of course, this is what we're seeing in the field. And that also required folks to strengthen their back-end business processes, so automating different advising practices, thinking about different ways that we can use AI and other technologies to truly help students on the back end figure out how these courses are going to transfer to their next institution. Also, is the dual enrollment staff that we currently have adequate? Instructors, staff, supports, being able to just talk about it and evaluate it is an quite, hopefully, easy first step. And then also, if possible, again, this is all provided the resources, but thinking about how can we develop a supply of qualified instructors, especially for our most underserved schools. And so we're not, we don't not think about the costs that this takes. Implementing deep practices, of course, we think they can be accessible to most institutions, but there are different costs that entail in implementing deep practices. For colleges, that could require some direct investments, discounted tuition and fee revenue, and also just organizational costs and thinking about how much money we're gonna have to put into getting more staff and training them and et cetera. And for K-12, this could include losing students and funding to colleges. It could also be a burden to counselors. It could be a cost for additional coordination between K-12 and colleges. We see competition with AP, IB, and costs for transportation. Some of these also falling onto students, especially in terms of transportation. And then competition between college CTE and high school CTE courses. Again, all these costs are involved, but we also have to think about what are these incentives? What are these things that dual credit can do not only for us and for helping students and our mission to just want students to succeed, but also what can it benefit college and K-12 schools? And so what we're seeing and what we saw in the data is that students under 18 are continuing to represent a large amount of enrollment in colleges across the nation. And so building back enrollment, especially thinking of older students who may not be going back to college, is a huge incentive for colleges. Also thinking about the potential of students that may not go to college now going to college. And also retention, completion, and when I mention reputational benefits, not just for the college, but for the student. If I know that my community college that I had a little bit of exposure to was a great experience, maybe I'll choose to go there after I graduate from high school, or maybe I'll choose to go to this 4-year that I had a great experience with. That exposure for students builds a reputation that they may use and they may also pass down to their peers. For K-12 schools, this can also help students who are looking for that edge in high school. Maybe they want more advanced courses, maybe they just want to accelerate more, and this is an opportunity for them to do that. They can also get new programs and partnerships with colleges, improve student outcomes, especially for underserved students, and possibly gains in state performance-based funding. And so this leads me into what Robin alluded to earlier. What does this mean for students? So we hear about the incentives for colleges and for K-12 institutions, but are we thinking about what students want? And the one great thing of doing this deep field research is that we talked to almost 100 dual enrollment students across 2 states and simply asked them, what do you want? And we're able to do a qualitative analysis which found 6 wants that we then put into this report and connected it to how the deep framework could respond to what these students want. So on the back of your sheets is actually a piece of the report, which is just a getting started of what we can ask students and also getting started of what we can ask in college and K through 12. But I do recommend that you read the report just because it literally outlines, hey, a student wants this, this is what we can do. And so I'm just gonna go over super briefly the 6 things. The first thing is that students wanted to know about their options earlier. A lot of students were just like, I didn't even know it was an option. Or when I found out it was an option, it was way too late and I only got to take a couple credits and I actually love dual credit. They also want advisors who empower them. We heard from a couple students that they actually felt discouraged to take dual enrollment because their advisor told them that they may not be ready for it. And maybe they aren't actually ready for it, but there's ways to reframe that conversation to make it productive and to encourage students to think about what are my other options or what other classes would be great for me. They also want their courses to be aligned with their fields of interest for both their career and academic pathways. So really intentionally thinking about, oh, I want to be a doctor. How does dual enrollment align for me? A lot of students were thinking about their future plans and just like, how do we backtrack dual enrollment into that? Again, with the online learning experiences, we saw in the DEEP framework the importance of providing additional supports for online students. We spoke to these students and we're like, what do you need? What do you want? And a lot of them wanted more engaging experiences, especially if they were just taking a course that was not synchronized with the live course. So they were just receiving the Canvas page and they were just like, here's your class. And they felt very left out and isolated from their communities. We also heard students want to know how to balance the high school experience and dual credit. A lot of students were like, maybe I don't want an associate's degree because I just want to be able to do extracurriculars. And they were really considering what their options were in terms of maybe I should do a lot or a little bit of dual credit based on that. And the last thing we also heard was students had asked us about how did we manage to pay for college after dual credit? And this finding was very interesting because I called my brother and I was like, do you think this finding is also the same? Because I had to ask somebody. And it really does resonate, especially with our underserved students, of what happens after dual credit. Hey, it's reduced now, it's lower cost now, it can help me now, but what happens after? And so students were asking about how do they find colleges and manage possible debt that they could incur after high school. I recommend reading this report. I did write it, but but I think it truly makes the DEEP framework actionable to respond to what students want. And so just a quick wrap up of what we learned and talked about today. The first thing is that what we're hearing in the field is that dual credit has resulted in inequitable access, and we've heard these things of programs of privilege and random acts of dual credit. This refers to the lack of access and intentionality that is currently occurring nationwide, and is also a great opportunity for us to rethink, how can we not do that? It has great potential, but it's currently being underutilized. As we can see, over 55 students in Kentucky alone are taking these courses. How can we make sure if we increase that number that it's also reaching our most low-income students, our most underserved students? And also, exclusionary practices, policies, and mindsets are what have led to this occurring, but we now know, especially now with the DEEP framework and other factors that we have, that this can be overturned, and there's things that we can do to support students better. And lastly, improvement of scale is possible. I mean, everything I'm saying is already on here, but it's so important to think about not only how dual enrollment is affecting the student, but it truly can affect us at the college level with our enrollments, with our K through 12 schools, with allowing our students to have an opportunity to learn about college. And so that leaves me with a final slide. Please feel free to scan this QR code. It goes to all of our DEEP resources. I am here as a resource as myself, so please feel free to email me or my team at any time. We do answer our emails as much as possible. I will say I answer more, but on top of that, I just want to thank you all for the work that you all do. Being and working and doing dual credit can change a student's life, and I empower you to continue doing that, so thank you. If anyone has any questions, I can also take them. Sorry, I ran off a little quickly. Yes. I don't know if we have any data that we've received from like iPads or the Student Clearinghouse, but we should have reports on tracking students with IEPs. I cannot confirm for sure though. But thanks for your question. Any other? Yeah. Ooh.
Okay, hi. Sorry, on slide 21, you had a recommendation to review staffing. Do you have either a framework for that or some suggestions that can be followed or that you have seen other schools done well?
Yeah, so off the top of my head, the report outlines it. So in the report, all of these strategies are outlined in greater detail with examples. So I would recommend you read the report. I can't think of them right off the top of my head, though, I'm sorry. But they're also, if you didn't scan the QR code on here, the QR code is the same on the document that is on your tables. Thank you. I think we're good. Any other questions? Okay, I think we're all good. I'll close it out.